of Ask the Agronomist. I'm Laura Cunningham here with Phil Long, and our topic today covers a variety of questions about emergence, soil conditions, dry conditions, some of those things that are really being felt from North Dakota to Iowa this planting season. And what it really comes down to is playing the hand that we're dealt. So, Phil, how is our blackjack hand stacking up this spring?
Well, it seemed like it started off really strong, which I guess sometimes can be a problem. Maybe we get a little overconfident in what we're seeing. But, to me, we had an excellent start. It was warm and dry. Kind of got everybody a little excited, even too early in April. We were talking about planting and trying to hold people back, but had good conditions. Like I said, it was dry early on, so we didn't have to fight moisture issues. It was more of when we waited to plant, fighting where the moisture was at, making sure we're planting deep enough and things like that. So really we had great conditions, warm for most of the, our Latham country. I mean, the soil moisture conditions and soil temperatures were good, what we planted into. So we had a really good start. I mean, it just seemed like it started out almost too good in some cases. Like I said, even up in the north, they got things planted that we haven't gotten planted in the last couple of years. So just good all around.
Yep. Okay. So from there, what are some things that you're tracking as the season progresses?
Yeah, early on it seems like there's a few things we can track at least and look at. Like I talk about when we go out and scout. But the things I want to kind of talk a little bit about are the things that that we know, whether we have seed in the ground or not, and that's temperatures, like I mentioned, soil moisture conditions, and we talk a lot about GDUs and precipitation and so forth. So I grabbed a few numbers just to kind of give everybody a little bit of an idea throughout Latham country what we're looking at. We ended up kind of going downhill, and I've talked to a lot of people about this. There's a little bit of a roller coaster in terms of moisture and especially soil temperatures. We started off good and then kind of came back down, and it's kind of leveled out below average in a lot of cases, which is not good. Maybe the corn germinated and then kind of sat there. Maybe it's out of the ground and still sitting there. No matter where you drive, it seems like it's all at the same stage, which is kind of unheard of. I know where we're at, where we farm, compared to down in southern Iowa, it seems like they're typically 2 to 3 weeks ahead. Well, that's not the case this year in terms of growth staging and so forth. So just kind of a little bit stagnant right now. But if we look across our territory, I grabbed, so in the southern part, we got central Iowa here. If you look at in the middle of the state where they should be ahead, GDUs wise, they're about 263 GDUs. I talk if you want to kind of reference that point, to get corn out of the ground, it's about 120, 125 GDUs to get out of the ground. So this is from April 15th, just to give you a reference. I started there. So if you didn't have corn in the ground yet, obviously you'd have to back that up. Precipitation, about 1.5 inches, and I'll be honest, they're in the better part of the state in terms of moisture. Soil temperature average from the last basically 30 days, 55 degrees. So if you look at, if we jump up into Minnesota a little ways, GDU's 180 roughly, under 1/2 inch of moisture, and they've been very spotty too. Soil temperature average around 52. And then if we jump all the way up to kind of the southeast part of North Dakota, they're at about 216 for GDUs, about 2300s. Like I said, this is obviously very location specific, a specific station. So it really depends. I mean, the moisture has been probably the biggest thing. It's just spotty in cases and really keyed in on, like we talked about before, planting depth and so forth. But we just had really slow growing conditions, and this has really set things back in terms of where the corn's sitting at right now. Even the corn that's out of the ground, this is the biggest thing to me, and this early on, a lot of the crop progress reports focus on emergence and so forth, so we don't have staging. But if you go out and start staging it, you'll notice it's not moving very quickly. And obviously it's still, corn at this stage, V1, V2, is still relying on the energy in the seed. It doesn't have those nodal roots out yet. So remember that, but even with the leaves out and it turning green, it's not the best looking green, but it's out. So even photosynthesis requires heat, sunlight, things like that, so it's cloudy and cool. We're sitting not so good. So things are just really slow, whether the corn's below ground, above ground, soybeans, whether most of them are below ground, they're just not moving very fast. like I've mentioned before, if it's a corn kernel or soybean kernel, it doesn't really care so much about the air temperature. It cares more about what's going on in the soil. And we just have not had the temperatures that we'd like to see. You know, we're sitting here going on mid to late May, you know, that time frame, and just not what we typically see. We're below average in a lot of cases. You know, and the other thing I would say that I've heard kind of throughout, which is kind of interesting, I've seen a lot here as we've been farming this spring, the amount of, you know, dust nados that show up. I've heard that all the way up in the Dakotas. Just very dry, windy conditions, exceptionally windy in a lot of cases, which doesn't help it, you know, when we're doing tillage, any operation. Wind is going to zap the moisture out of the plant. So just not great ideal conditions after that really good start that we had.
Okay, so turned up an early king maybe in our hand with that early dry and warm weather for planting, but then a couple more cards fell, so. We could still make some decisions though on moves that were next. How did that play out as tillage was completed and different things as planting continued then?
That's a great point, because that to me would be the next thing. In the last few years, it's always been it seems like it comes up, residue management and tillage. This year, you know, last fall we had good tillage, we had plenty of time for it. This spring we had plenty of time for it. A lot of tillage was done, some wasn't done because of foreseeing the dry conditions that we're still sitting in. If you look at the drought monitor, it's a wide swath across not only Latham country, but I see even looking throughout the country, you know, Michigan talking a lot about that and soybeans, and you know, and then we got below that across the tri-state area, though, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, getting really wet, talking about replanting. So I mean, sometimes it's perspective, but yeah, the moisture issue is a huge deal. So as far as tillage, you know, a lot of what we've seen this spring talked about not doing so much tillage. In a lot of cases, there was quite a bit of tillage done, and those cases actually are seeing some better emergence. Now, will it play out that they end up better off in terms of moisture later on? That's obviously yet to be determined, but yeah, the tillage this year, it seems like, played out well for those that did tillage, had moisture enough in those heavy ground areas that germinated well and so forth, and had good stand. And on the flip side of that, those that maybe didn't do as much tillage or or incorporated residue a little too much, had some issues with residue and germination and so forth. So those things always hurt us, because corn or soybeans can't absorb moisture as well from residue. So when that's in the furrow and we have issues with that, that always causes a problem, slows things down, and if it doesn't germinate quickly, if it imbibe that water quickly, that slows that germination process down and can cause, you know, we haven't had the cold, but still slow growing conditions getting it out of the ground. We want to see it come up as quick as we can, ideally, but the other thing I'll mention is we always talk about 50 degrees, you know, and that is kind of our minimum, you know, we want to see. But like I mentioned before, we're averaging in the low 50s, and we kind of went back down after we planted. Soil temps went back down, so not a good thing. You know, that excuse me, that doesn't help corn or soybeans to emerge and start growing well, and the roots to get established. So just a lot of things not playing, you know, as well as we would have liked to see. Things kind of went backwards a little bit, in essence, and the cards are not what we want to see right now.
Okay, so early king. Maybe our card down is a 7. We're sitting okay. What's our next move?
Yeah, so unfortunately we don't want to hear this, but patience. Patience is a virtue. You know, you got to really wait till all the cards are dealt. I know in a lot of cases, you know, we talk about stand establishment and seeing how things are coming up and stuff. Patience is key. And I keep waiting, you know, whenever I hear, you know, emergence issues, I think, okay, we need a little time and a little heat. We have not gotten the heat, so that's a challenge. It looks like we're looking that way this week and later this week into the weekend, which is great news. And hopefully some moisture. I hope everybody gets some moisture, because that will really even things out. As slow growing as everything is, you know, it's not going to be far ahead in terms of growth staging. So, you know, we need to wait. We need to see what that heat does, what the rain and moisture does, and helps us out, gets those things going. You know, and the other thing I'd say, if you want to take the time and look at some of these things, I talked last week about the root system and the potential for maybe some, as we call it, floppy corn or rootless corn down the road. And that's my caution in terms of if you're considering replant. you may not be better off, especially if you're in dry areas. You're setting yourself back a good 2 weeks. Even if the corn comes up in 10 days or so, you're still setting yourself back about 2 weeks in terms of moisture. And we could lose more moisture going into the summer. So that's a word of caution. Go out there and dig those corn seedlings. I've seen a lot of them in pictures and so forth the last few weeks. See where that seed is, and then that first thing that comes out of the seed is the mesocotyl. You'll see a little bump, and then you'll see the coleoptile that comes out and breaks through the ground. And hopefully that little bump there is about 3/4 of an inch below the soil surface. That's where it should establish itself. That's where the crown of the plant is, where those nodal roots will start to come out of, and hopefully you're starting to see those come out. If those come out in a dry soil and they don't have enough time to find the moisture, then that's when we end up, they desiccate, die, and the corn will eventually fall over because it doesn't have enough roots holding it, anchoring it down, and obviously capturing nutrients and water. So just a lot of things there. You just want to keep those in mind if you're thinking about something like that in terms of replant. Typically it doesn't pay unless you don't have a stand out there. So if you're seeing uneven emergence, be patient, dig them up, make sure they're healthy, and wait.
All right.
Unfortunately, a tough thing to do, and there's lots of risk involved, just like the game of farming.
Yep.
So.
Yep. All right. Well, great tips, Phil. Thanks, listeners, for joining us this week. He's telling us to be patient and evaluate the cards that are dealt. So we'll pray over the next couple weeks that the cards fall our way, though. So
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another topic.